brand new court filing in Michael Flynn's case, and it just became public moments ago. This is important because while it overlaps with things we know from the Mueller report, it is a new filing, as Chuck Todd was just mentioning. Mike Flynn, Donald Trump's former national security advisor, telling Mueller's investigators about specific documented instances where people linked to the Trump administration may have affected even his willingness to cooperate. Mueller spelling out the details in his report that included a transcript of a voicemail that one of Trump's own personal criminal defense attorneys left for Flynn's lawyer. It asked for information. And the voicemail, here again from the report in the filing, said, quote, "If there's information that implicates the president, we've got a national security issue. So, you know, we need some kind of heads up. Just for the sake of protecting all of our interests, if we can. Remember that we've always said about the president and his feelings towards Flynn, and that still remains. These new revelations of how the president's team were trying to engage in these high-level discussions with an individual who now had an obligation to Mueller. The question being, were those efforts to potentially obstruct or thwart the Mueller probe? Now, this is interesting because some of this may sound familiar to you because we've been hearing about it, but it comes now in a backdrop where the Democratic Party and congressional leaders are openly discussing what to do about both congressional stonewalling and the hangover from what the Mueller report showed, all of which has people talking about the I word.
The president's policy now, the president's posture now, is making it impossible to rule out impeachment or anything else.
Well, I think there are grounds for impeachment. If you look at the second part of the Mueller report, there is no question that obstruction of justice does exist.
I think the president every day gives grounds for impeachment in terms of his obstruction of justice.
I want to get right to it with Juanita Tolliver, campaign director for the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post, who has been a chronicler of the Trump presidency as well as its interaction with the Mueller probe from its inception. Good evening to both of you.
Hey, Ari.
Good evening.
Juanita, what do you think of the significance of what we're seeing in these details in the Flynn filing against this wider backdrop, as we just saw, including former Obama AG Eric Holder speaking out, by my count, more forthrightly than he ever has to date on what he called, quote, grounds for impeachment?
It's absolutely clear that with Trump's blanket rejection of all these document requests from Congress, that he is hiding something. This evidence of his team coordinating as it relates to the Mueller report and everything that Mueller even laid out in his report all points to an effort to really interfere and be engaged in an unproductive way that should be raising flags for American people. And honestly, at this point, if Congress is not allowed to move forward, it really shows that Trump is using his leverage to operate as a dictator would, as a tyrant would, and that's really dangerous because Congress has the legal authority to hold him accountable. They have the legal authority to request these documents. And this new report really highlights that they should be able to move forward.
Bob, take us inside the White House based on your reporting and against a backdrop where there has been, I think it's fair to say, some moving of the goalposts. And Mr. Barr has tried to put his view of things out in Washington as the first draft of history. They haven't yet let Bob Mueller set a date for testimony. But then Barr today, in reports coming out today, says he's not blocking Mueller's testimony to Congress, saying, quote, it's Bob's call whether he wants to testify.
And there's a lot of pressure on the Attorney General to allow Mr. Mueller to testify. With regard to this breaking news on General Flynn and his interactions and his team's interactions with the president's lawyers, there's a feeling inside of this White House that they have a blind spot when it comes to some of these obstruction questions. What I mean by that is there are personal lawyers for the president who have been on the outside, an ever-changing cast at times, from John Dowd and Ty Cobb to Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow, who have had exchanges and interactions with witnesses in the Mueller probe, whether it was Michael Cohen or Michael Flynn and others. And those conversations are not always known or really understood inside of this administration. And they feel like as this obstruction investigation moves forward on Capitol Hill, the president's personal lawyers will be under more scrutiny by Democrats.
Well, I want to ask you about that. You talk about a blind spot. One of the things that comes through to me, and I'm curious what you think, having talked to a lot of these folks, is there was kind of an apparent fear that Donald Trump may have actually done more than Mueller found that he did. did something worse than what part one of the report says, now that we know it all. Because you can see, I think quite clearly, the panic in that voicemail. I mean, lawyers don't want to generally leave a voicemail like that. They want to have a live call. They know that a cooperating witness and his lawyers will have every incentive to turn over the voicemail and the material. And you get the question of, hey, you know, what does Flynn have? What do you know? It could really hurt the boss. And I say to you, how did they get so nervous unless they didn't believe what Trump was telling them, which is that part one of the Mueller report would suggest that there wasn't a quid pro quo that was chargeable with Russia?
They've been nervous since day one because they know how the president operates in this extemporaneous style, often not briefing his own aides about who he's talking to, what he's saying, even when it comes to things like foreign policy. He has phone calls with friends, associates, builds his own perspectives on different issues, and doesn't always bring in the formal circle of people that a president would bring in to the decision-making process. And because of that, they did feel exposure inside of this White House about not really knowing the full context of every conversation he had with many of these witnesses during the course of the transition and early on in the presidency.
Yeah, I mean, Juanita, to simplify it a little bit, I don't want to put words in Bob's mouth, but I'm saying this. You hear what he just said, and you get the feeling that the one thing that, like, the resistance and Rudy Giuliani agree on is you can't really trust Trump.
Can't trust Trump. He's lied to the American public. He's apparently lying to his own attorneys to the point where they're all trying to scramble and figure out what he has omitted from their conversations. And honestly, it really lays the foundation that Congress should be able to move forward to find the truth. We all need to hear from Mueller in a public testimony. We all need to get to the bottom of this.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.